I've been thinking about this for a while, just reflecting on the big and small ways God has shown up for me. Some moments were loud and clear miracles. Others were quiet nudges that reminded me that I'm not alone. I don't know what you're walking through right now, but I hope these testimonies remind you that God still sees, still speaks, still moves, even in the little things. And I thought to share these because I know I'm usually encouraged by how God works in other people's lives and what he does in their lives. So I thought I would do a video like this. And you can always let me know in the comments if you liked it and you want to see more of these. There was one night I was just praying and I got really passionate and I was just asking God to provide. And it wasn't anything specific, but I was just asking God to provide, naturally provide for my needs and all these stuff. So then the next day I ended up talking to someone and I just ended up talking to them about my situation, not specifically what I prayed about, but I just started being very transparent about what I was going through. And what was funny or weird, I like to say that, was that all of a sudden they're like, you know what, I'm just gonna give you a gift cards because I've been praying about it and I was asking God to show me who I need to give it to. I remember being like, oh no, it's okay, you don't need to give me it. There was a voice that said, remember how you prayed last night? And I remember thinking, no way they would have known that I was praying for God to provide. Now, I didn't know that's how it was going to happen in that exact way, but I thought that was very interesting. So I ended up getting gift cards for groceries that were very helpful because it allowed my money to stretch even more. And that moment, it just showed me that you never know how fast God can respond to your prayer. And it reminded me to always keep an open mind. Don't have a specific plan or a way of how you want God to answer. Let him answer the way that he needs to answer to meet your need. And it was very encouraging at that moment. Okay, so here's my next one. I went to a Euro trip a few years ago and I ended up having excessive amount of Euro dollars coming back because once you go to a cruise, you quickly find out that you don't need to spend that much because everything is covered. So there was times where I was having a very hard time financially, so I started using up my Euro dollars. And so it came a day where I used my last Euro dollars. I took everything out of this black pouch and I brought it to the bank and I used it. I remember it was like $40 left, okay? And so there was one night where I was just praying to God, asking him to provide. I was like, God, I need money for gas. I'm not going to be able to go to church. Like, it was to that point. And so all of a sudden, I just kept on hearing this loud voice say, look in your closet. And then I kept on fighting back because I'm like, there's nothing in the closet. I already used all the Euro dollars. And they kept on saying, check the pouch. Look in the closet. And I was like, there's nothing there. I used everything. And so it got stronger and stronger. So finally I was like, okay, fine. I'm going to go into my closet and look into that pouch again. Guess what happened? Kid you not, when I looked in that black pouch, there was Euro dollars in there. And it ended up being like $150 or something like that. And let me remind you, I do remember the day, this was a couple years ago, where I had completely emptied out that pouch. And then for some reason, there was money in there. It's the weirdest thing, and to this day, I don't know how that was, but all I know is that the Holy Spirit kept on saying to go check there. And I remember when I emptied out that pouch. You guys may think it's crazy, no, but I remember because I was going through a hard time, and I used up everything in there. And there was money in there. So I was doing a road test, and this was specifically for a bigger vehicle, so like a bus, like a kind of a truck license. And I remember having so much anxiety because we had to back the bus up, basically, between the two cones. And let's just say, my strong suit was not reversing a bus, okay? I struggled a lot with that. So before doing the road test the night before, there was so much anxiety. I kept up praying. I would put Christian music on, all these stuff. And I just kept on praying and saying, God, make me drive the bus like I had 10, 15 years experience. So the day comes and I kind of understand how to reverse it, but I would just say that I was not perfect at it, okay? And so I backed up the bus, thinking it was straight, and not realizing that the bus was actually going crooked, backing up between the cones, which meant, okay, that there was a wheel that was about to hit the first cone. So my goal was, because they had 3 lines that you can back up in, and you would either get 4 points or 2 points or 0 points. Obviously you want to get 0 points. And so basically the whole front of the bus was not in between the cones. So I got most of the bus in, but it was not in between the cones. Got out, checked, and I was like, oh, well, I'm at the line, but the front of the bus was not in there because it was all crooked, okay? And so I went back in the bus, and I remember moving in a little bit more, as close as I can get it to, because like I said, the front wheel on my left side, driver's side, was about to hit one of the cones. All of a sudden, I heard this voice say, stop, stop the bus. Finish the test, that's it, done. Now, at the time, I didn't realize it was the Holy Spirit, but I only realized after, and I'm going to tell you why. So I get out, and I went to the examiner, and I said, hey, can I stop here? And he's like, yeah, okay, 4 points. He was like, okay, take the points. And so what I found out later is someone else was watching, and they said that they were getting so much anxiety because all they were thinking was, stop the bus and take the points. You better not pull out. And I told them at that moment, the funny part is, I thought of pulling out, but something was just like, do not pull out the bus. There was something in me that was just like, don't pull out the bus. And I later told them, something was just like, stop the bus. Just stop the bus. I ended up passing that road test with the bus half in there. I basically believed that it was a miracle that I passed it. I should have basically failed because that bus was so crooked. And if I had made just a millimeter of a wrong decision to back it up even more, I would have failed the test. If I had made the decision to pull out and then correct myself, I would have failed. Did I mention that there was like a 10-minute limit? And it was the Holy Spirit that had to bring that to my attention and say, this is not normal. That everyone just keeps on saying the same line. You're going to pass. I think there was over 10 people that said that. And it took me a while to realize that was God sending people to confirm that I was going to pass, and I did pass. I don't think I've ever had an experience like that. But God was using people, telling them the same line. You're going to pass. You're going to pass. He just keeps on speaking that to me for encouragement. So that's the encouraging of crazy ways God can work. How he could just send confirmation while you're in the process, while you may be thinking, oh God, I may be failing, and while you're praying and you're trying not to be double-minded, God could use people to confirm, because he already knows that you're going to pass, that you're meant to be here. I was in a hospital in 2019, and I had issues in my stomach, were the point where I didn't eat for weeks, so I lost a lot of weight. I was very happy about that. But my mom didn't like hearing that. Anyways, I told her that's a perfect way to lose weight, and she was like, not when you're sick. Basically, they thought it was something else, so they thought it was like a cyst. You know, if you have endometriosis, you get cysts and stuff. But then when they ended up cutting me open, it ended up being abscess, which was like way worse, right? You can get abscess like on your body, and usually it's very painful. So I had it in my insides. And the next day, the doctor came up to me while I was in bed, and she was like, I don't know how you're alive. She was like, that is crazy. And she said, if it keeps on coming back inside your stomach, eventually they're gonna have to take out your uterus. And I remember at the time, all I could do is laugh. I'm like, this is very funny, attack from the enemy. Because at the time, that was when I was like, oh my God, I wanna have babies. I'm never gonna have babies now if they take in my uterus. This is an attack from the enemy. They can only cut you open so many times, right? Because then it gets weaker and weaker where you keep on cutting. And so I remember there was just something in me where I was like, you know what? I'm going to pray. So then I started looking in the Bible of women who were barren, so especially Rachel's story. And I started just praying over that story. I started just like praying while reading that story for encouragement and saying, no, I'm not going to be barren. Kid you not, I think a few days later, the doctor comes back all of a sudden and they're like, oh, everything's okay. We don't need to do that. We don't need to take out uterus. And do you know that years down the line, I actually checked in with my doctor to make sure everything was okay. And they said, oh, everything's perfect. It looks like nothing was ever there. So they didn't have to get my uterus out. Just prayed. And that's why I always tell people that the doctor never has the last word. So if you are having a diagnosis right now, and the doctor is giving you some bad news. I know the doctors obviously have their education, they're specialized, they have knowledge, but nothing beats God's last word. They don't have the last say, they're not God. So yes, you listen to them, you listen to the diagnosis, but you have to believe that's not the last word. If I believed that my doctor, I probably would have had my uterus out right now, but I just prayed and miraculously everything was fine. They didn't have to take out nothing. You have to believe God has the last word, not the doctor. I've had so much favor in my life where I used to think like doors were just opening because they're opening because, I don't know, it was just opening. I went through a lot of like times in my life where I would get coaches and on workout things with coaches and they would be end up just supernatural helping me. I've had coaches where they would help me for free. I've built relationship with people where sometimes I'll just go to them and say, hey, I need your help, and they wouldn't even charge me. And they'll just pour out their expertise into me. I've gotten to points where I've met mentors where I just had favor where people just want to help me. I've had points where I've met friends who were very successful coaches where I would go to them and say, hey, I'm willing to pay you. And they'd be like, no, I'll just help you. And I believe it was a favor of God. Sometimes there's such a favor in your life that people just want to help you. If you're open, God will send people in your life just to help you, to help you move forward. You'll be surprised. So I've seen a lot of that in my life. I think that was something to share. God can open doors, okay, that you probably would have never opened doors. You guys know my background. Like, I don't have much connections. And God will just open doors, but people just want to help you. Every time to this day I've joined a coaching program, there's someone always in there that's saying, hey, contact me anytime, I'll help you. I'll help you grow, blah, blah, blah. Just like that. So I'm just sharing this with you because if you feel like you have no connections, you don't know where to start praying for God's favor over your life. Start praying that God will put people in your life to help you. Even if you don't have the money, God can put people in your life to get you where you need to be. So back in 2016, I had lost my job from the dealership. And at the time, I thought it was the end of the world because it was one of those moments where I felt stuck. I didn't know how to get ahead. I was doing a ton of research and it felt like I ran out of time, basically. And my time is up. And I ended up losing the job before I figured out what I was going to do next. So I remember being so depressed. They put me in a taxi because I wasn't driving at the time. And so I got home, started speaking to a friend from church. And I was feeling so depressed. I was like, how am I going to pay my bills? Yes, there's unemployment, but still, you're like, okay, how am I going to pay my bills down the road? And all of a sudden, my friend just said, Nakia, this is the time for you to spread your wings. You've been talking about wanting to own your own business. And I don't know, they just said that one word and all the depression went away. All that sad feeling went away. Kid you not, the next day I was up and running. Didn't feel any depression, went to the library, I would just read books, try to learn as much about marketing. About a few weeks later, I saw an opportunity on Facebook where someone was teaching how to start an Amazon store. And as much as it sounds obvious where you're like, okay, well, you just jumped into Amazon, that was it. I was actually very conflicted. I had to use my last savings. I was like, okay, so I can try a new path and see how it goes where I might fail, or I can continue to do the jobs that I hate doing and feel depressed and be in the same spot and never take the risk. And when I thought about it, I don't know, there was something in me where I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna believe in myself. And at the time, I didn't know that was going to be the ticket to get me out from where I was going to be. So I ended up working with the coach. I believe that was the first time where I actually believed in myself. It was the first time where I decided to choose myself and not do something out of fear because everyone else was doing. The noble thing that I should have done was just go look for a new job. But that was the first time where I was like, you know what, let me go for it. The first week that I did it, I made my first dollar online. And then within 3 months, I tripled what I paid and made it back. And do you know, when I went back to that coach, he actually told me, I didn't know that you were going to be one of my best students, because he was like, you were so skeptical. And it's just proof that God can change the trajectory of your life like this. He could close one door and open another door. I truly believe that if he didn't close that door and I didn't get let go of that job, I never would have gone for that opportunity because there was so much comfort. There was so much fear. There was many times where I was going to hire a coach but didn't hire them because I was like, oh, no, I can't risk this. Every time. And I know sometimes I have to admit I can forget this, especially in times where I feel stuck. But you can't look at your circumstances as is. Because you don't know what God is getting you ready for, and you don't know what he's planning behind what you cannot see. You don't know what he's planning. Like, I had no idea that this was going to be the way that he took me out. That was going to be the way that I paid off debt. That was going to be the way that I got my first car. I thought I was going to be stuck there forever. It's like that little faith. Like, sometimes we think that we need like this big faith. That little faith and just trusting God. It doesn't need to be grand. Sometimes it's just that little trust. So maybe a year later after COVID, I ended up being in a contract with another job. And I ended up losing that job. Let me back up a bit. Before I got sick in 2019, I felt this strong urge to travel. But I was too scared, and at the time I was doing Amazon, I was making a lot of money, and I was like, every time I would want to go, I was like, no. I was too nervous to go solo, because it was going to be the first time I traveled, and what ended up happening, I ended up getting sick, and then all the stuff that I mentioned before, it came a point when I lost the job. Now, I don't know, all of a sudden I was so depressed, and I remember I was speaking to a therapist, and all of a sudden she was just like, Nikki, I think you need to go. She's like, I think you should just go. And I didn't have that much money left. Like, I ended up using what I had left, and I ended up going to Mexico. And I went alone. I was scared. And it just so happened that a host reached out to me on Facebook, and they offered their place to me. And I know it was very dangerous, but I did it. I felt really good when I spoke to them. So I ended up going there, and the hosts were so kind because they got me out of the house because they were like, there's no way you're staying up in this house in Mexico because you're out of fear. So she started just walking me around Coyoacan. It was actually Coyoacan. Getting me comfortable. A few days went by because I ended up staying there for about a month. All of a sudden I got this idea. So like a weekend, I was like, you know what, why not I try a hobby or something? So I was like, let's do salsa dancing because that's the like obvious thing to do. And so I found this. I don't recommend this to people, but I just kind of looked at Google and then told Uber to go there. But now that I'm more experienced, okay, you shouldn't just do that. But I think I was just like that childlike faith, and I was like, okay, we'll just go Uber, go to whatever area that place is. And so I went to this dance school. It ended up being in the other side of like Coyoacan. It was safe. Nothing happened. But I quickly learned that you shouldn't just get the address, punch it into Uber, and then just go. Let's just say that. Do you know that was one of the ways that I was able to make friends? That was a way where I met the owner. We ended up becoming good friends. And I was able to be introduced. She started taking me around Mexico and different places. And it came a point where I started to stop myself. And I was like, wait, I'm not feeling lonely. It was at that moment where I was like, I'm not feeling lonely. I'm like, what am I doing differently? Like, immediately I started analyzing, right? What am I doing differently? I was going out and I was doing something that I enjoyed. Where I was in Toronto at the time, I wasn't doing things I enjoyed. I just stayed home by myself. I like had friends, but not anything crazy. I wasn't putting myself out there. All I was doing was just dating, but I wasn't doing anything else. I remember I vowed to myself, when I get back, I'm gonna do the same thing I did when I traveled. Mexico was a place where my dream just came alive. I got new perspective. I got more than I thought I expected I was gonna get. And I realized that God was putting that in me to go because I needed that fresh perspective, but I just didn't have the guts at the time. And so losing that job is what pushed me to go there. I went there in my lowest moment. And I remember thinking when I was going, this is so ironic that I'm going in the lowest moment. And it's funny because God will show you things and use you in the times where you don't feel like doing anything, the times where everything feels like a mess. That's the times where God will just speak to you and he'll just inspire you, because those are the times when you are just open. We take those times for granted, but God can use any situation and turn it around. and lift you up and give you new perspective. Taking that trip out of faith and just being low and ended up being one of the best turning points in my life. It taught me how to enjoy my own company. It taught me how to make friends and put myself out there. It taught me how to do hobbies. It taught me to do things even when I didn't feel like it. When I felt like just staying home and being like, oh, I just want to stay home in my comfort zone. It taught me how to get out of my comfort zone. Now I tell people to change their environment. If you're getting that voice, listen to it. If you're getting that voice that's telling you to go somewhere else, it can be a city. It doesn't have to be a whole new country. But there's that voice that's just pulling you and saying, go here. And you're like, oh, I don't want to go. Or there's a sense of fear, you need to go. Listen to that voice because that one decision could change your life. Could transform you. So I decided to call my phone company because I was behind on bills. And they wanted to work out a payment plan, but I couldn't afford it. I just couldn't spin it because I already had paid an amount towards them for that week. So the biggest thing I noticed is that I didn't know this. So when I'd be behind on bills, they would add some like suspension fee like for the data that I didn't know that they included. So then it'd always be $70. Where I thought when I would call in and they would put it back, that they were just putting it back. I didn't realize that they were actually suspending the service, if that makes sense, because I was still able to use my phone and all that. And so all of a sudden, I call in and then we're talking, we went back and forth for a while. She comes back and all of a sudden she's like, I'm willing to waive all the fees. So she waived like over $150 and I was able to start from scratch, start from zero because of that. And the bill started from scratch, for a clean slate, where I just had to pay like your maintenance, so it was way less than paying close to $150 plus the bill, which would have been 200 something, and it ended up being just like 70 something. And at first I didn't think that it was a testimony, but I was like, that doesn't usually happen. Because when I started to tell people, they're like, Nakia, like that's a blessing from God that you were able to get that wiped clean. Start praying, you just never know. So there's another one. So I started new training. I had accrued fees in my library card. Because, so a drink ended up going on these books, which deemed them damaged. There was one night where I was like, man, I wish I could just get these specific books from the library, but I can't now. And I just heard a voice say, go into the library and talk to someone, tell them your situation, and see what they can do. So at the time, listen, at this point, hey, I can throw the little that I have, whether that's $10, $5, whatever. I was in that mindset ready to work out something with them because I think I was owing like 60 something dollars. I went in, I was so vulnerable, and I didn't beg anything. I just said, hey, let me know what I can do. I really need this for this new training, all this stuff. And the woman just looked at me and she's like, I'm just gonna waive all the fees. And I was like, what? And she's like, I'm just gonna waive it for you. She wiped out fees. They don't usually do that. She just made it zero. And it was at that moment, I knew it was the Holy Spirit. Something kept to tell me all day. Like, that voice did not simmer down on me until I did it. Like, I was so nervous because I was like, oh my God, God. Now I have to put myself out there and explain it because I'm hearing a voice saying, go there and do this. I'm like, oh Lord. It was outside my comfort zone. But you know, some of the testimonials that you have is usually something that's outside your comfort zone where people just show up. And it's the little things where God will just show up that will just give you encouragement. She just wiped it off. And I was able to get my books. And I cried so much because I was like, this is so beautiful. How God will just take care of you if you just trust Him. And you know what's crazy is that when I got home, I ended up opening a mail where it was about to go in collection and they're about to add like an extra $12 on there. And I was like, look at that. You just don't know how God will show up. If you just talk to Him, God will just give you the blueprint, tell you what you have to do. And it may not be comfortable. It may be uncomfortable. It may make you feel like, God, why does it have to be this way? I don't want to do it. But when you just listen to Him and you follow His direction, He'll do the rest. He will use people to bless you. Sometimes we don't realize it, but God will He will use people. He put people around you that you never expected to just bless you. I went into that library not expecting all that to happen. I was just expecting to pay something and hopefully get something out of it. So this was a mix of just testimonies I've had. I probably have way more. But I thought to do a different video like this to encourage you guys. And let me know if you like these type of videos, if you want me to do more of these type of videos with things that God has done in my life. So let me know in the comments.